Pope Leo XIV is going after President Donald Trump on social media, and Trump posted a picture of himself as Jesus. What a week. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Now, this is one of those shows that may or may not upset every single person listening in the audience, but that's okay. We're not afraid of conflict. We're not afraid of working through ideas, of stepping on toes, no matter whose toes they are. So parents, I always encourage you to listen together with your kids. What we want to do with our children is not shelter them from the bad ideas out there, from the crazy world of politics. We want to help train them to walk through it, to sharpen our arrows so our children, are soon to be adults, scary as that sounds, are able to respond to the arguments they're going to come across. And teens, if you want to debate like Charlie Kirk did or ask questions like Ali Beth Stuckey, you simply must understand your opponent's best arguments. We are on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. Okay, we are going to today look at a post on X put out by the Pope. The Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, and let's have a pause point right there. This is another one of the unique things about this podcast. I encourage you to actually stop the podcast and to talk about this question together. Remember, parents, you are your teens or preteens' most important teacher. Make a habit of discussing things like this. All right, so let's get into the question. What are the differences between Protestants and Catholics? Why is your family a Protestant or a Catholic? All right, let's just make a couple of notes here. This is a huge topic, and I always like to joke that I'm trying to keep the podcast to 20 minutes, but if I gave a real answer on this, we'd be at 16 hours. So I'm not going to give a big answer, but I do want to just touch on some of the differences. And the second thing I want to make a note of is that when you have a belief in one direction on a question like this, for instance, I am Protestant, make sure that the answer that you give paints the party that you disagree with in the best light. That doesn't mean we need to be dishonest. We don't need to lie about what the other person believes or the other side believes. We just don't want to give a skewed version of the truth. And one way to do this, it doesn't just apply here, it can apply to politics or anything, is to look for neutral sources of information or even sources from the other side. So as a Protestant, I shouldn't just go to a Protestant source of information. I should say, okay, this is kind of what I think is the difference. And now I need to go confirm that, not with someone who's just automatically going to agree with me, but a neutral source or even a Catholic source of information. All right, but there are a couple of differences, and I think these are important to talk about, especially as we dig into kind of religion and politics, and there's an intermixing in this tweet or in this post on X. There is an organizational difference between Protestants and Catholics. Eastern Orthodox, organizational difference. Catholicism is a huge organization with a clear hierarchy. The Pope is at the top. Protestant denominations have more diffuse leadership. In some churches, the leadership is at the church. Other denominations, they will have something that looks a little bit more like Catholicism, but where with Catholicism, you have one leader at the top of one organization. Protestants, you have lots of different organizations and different levels or amounts of leadership. And then spiritually, the biggest difference may be on where authority lies. And this is from Catholic.com. So look, I took my own advice, right? I didn't just go pull out Martin Luther, but we're going to look and look at where is the authority. Protestants claim the Bible is the only rule of faith, meaning that it contains all of the material one needs for theology, that this material is sufficiently clear that one does not need apostolic tradition or the church's magisterium or teaching authority to help one understand it. In the Protestant view, the whole of Christian truth is found within the Bible's pages. Anything extraneous to the Bible is simply non-authoritative unnecessary, or wrong. Catholics, on the other hand, recognize that the true rule of faith, as expressed in the Bible itself, is Scripture plus apostolic tradition, as manifested in the living teaching authority of the Catholic Church, to which were entrusted the oral teachings of Jesus and the apostles, along with the authority to interpret Scripture correctly. All right, so you can kind of see the difference here, right? Protestants are saying, where do we go for the truth? We go to the Bible. Catholics say, where do we go to the truth? We go to the Bible plus this tradition. All right, again, I'm not gonna dig into the differences there. I personally am a Protestant, but I think for us Protestants, this next question is actually really important, because it's so easy to focus on the differences or things that we might find weird or different about another branch of Christianity. Let's have this pause point. What should Protestants be grateful for about Catholicism? Have you ever thought about that? Well, here's one thing. Protestantism wouldn't exist without Catholicism. Doesn't mean that we agree with everything in Catholic teaching, obviously, but we can appreciate the historical record that Protestantism comes out, rebels from, right? But there is that shared lineage. We can certainly be appreciative of the monks who preserved the Bible and other ancient manuscripts. This is answerthebible.com. Monasteries became centers of learning during the Middle Ages, meticulously copying scripture by hand. Remember, there's no Xerox machines. Oh man, I'm dating myself. There's no copy machines. There's no iPhones. You just take a picture and then it just reproduces. Monks saw it as their sacred duty to preserve God's word for future generations. Some of the oldest and most reliable biblical manuscripts we have today were copied in monasteries. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, we had a show on Easter, the evidence for Easter, and some of the strongest evidence for the historical accuracy of the Bible are from manuscripts that were copied by people in the Catholic Church. We can be appreciative of that. There are famous Christian figures like St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas who were Catholic. They gave us ideas and things like the just war theorem that we still use today. That we talk a lot about worldviews on this show. You may not know that this is where it comes from, but there are ideas that I'm guessing you believe in or rely on that stem from, that have their roots in the Catholic Church. All right. All that being said, let's take a look at what Pope Leo XIV wrote on X on Friday. God does not bless any conflict. Anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword and today drop bombs. Military action will not create space for freedom or times of peace, which comes only from the patient promotion of coexistence and dialogue among peoples. All right, I'm going to read that again. Especially if you're listening. It's hard to kind of take it all in. Again, this is from the Pope. God does not bless any conflict. Anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword and today drop bombs. Okay, this is very clearly an attack on President Trump and what he's doing in Iran. All right, back to what he wrote. Military action will not create space for freedom or times of peace, which comes only from the patient promotion of coexistence and dialogue among peoples. Okay, let's have a pause point. Especially if you have the same opinion as me and you find that statement really galling, I want you to take a moment and just describe what's appealing about Pope's Leo's argument. Okay, this is really important. We hear this, especially if you're a conservative Christian. No, if you study the Bible, there are things like just coming, right? They're just rapid firing. Yeah, I got this, and I got this, and I got this, and we're gonna get there. But I want you to make the case. Why would he say this? What basis does he have to say this? Again, that doesn't mean you agree with him, but it does help you understand his argument. All right, and that's what we're going to do. That's what we do on this podcast, right? We talk about the best ideas of the other side. Okay, so Pope Leo says God does not bless any conflict. Well, look in 1 John. God is love. Dropping bombs on people, that's not very loving. Killing people, that's not very loving. Further, when Jesus was here, he didn't come to bring about a political revolution, just the opposite. In fact, he taught his disciples to turn the other cheek. Look at Matthew 5:38-40. Again, this is Jesus speaking. You've heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. All right, and then we get to the next part of his statement. Military action will not create space for freedom or times of peace. Well, yeah, this seems obvious, right? I mean, if you want peace, violence is the opposite of peace. So if you want peace, you don't commit violence. So if your goal is peace, you don't do the thing that's not peace, right? That's just simple logic. All right, let's have another pause point. Why should we take Pope Leo's objection seriously? Now, there's a couple of answers to this question. The most obvious is that he is the Pope. He is the spiritual leader, the head of an organization that claims over 1 billion adherents, including tens of millions of people in the United States. He has massive influence. So because of his platform, because of his authority, this is an argument that needs to be engaged, even though it really really does sound like someone trolling you on your social media page. Pope Leo's got a huge platform, a huge amount of influence. He needs to be taken seriously. But there's a second reason, and this is just kind of teens for you to think about as you get exposed to social media. There are going to be people on social media who post things that they would never tell you in real life, but post things to get a reaction. And oftentimes the internet slang is trolls, and you don't feed the trolls. Why? Because they're not looking for a serious argument. They're looking to get a reaction. They're not going to be engaged in a good faith back and forth. They're just looking for points to kind of poke at you. And that's actually very good advice. I strongly encourage people to be very, very careful when arguing on social media. And one of the reasons is that a lot of the people on social media are not arguing in good faith. They're just there to get a reaction. So I certainly do encourage you to share your opinion, especially if it's well-reasoned. But there are people, and they'll be pretty quick to identify, who simply are just there to poke and not engaged in a good faith discussion. But we've kind of talked about this today, right? The Catholic institution, the Catholic Church, is a serious institution with serious principles. And I do encourage you to engage with people who have principles, because those conversations are productive, they're stimulating, and you may even convince them, because again, they're not looking for a reaction, they're actually pursuing truth. All right, so let's have a pause point, and we are going to respond to Pope Leo. Which of the great 8 questions would you use in response to his argument? And as a reminder, the great 8 questions are tools that we put in our mental toolbox to help us unpack arguments and claims made by other people. Question 1, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? Okay, I really hope you chose one today, because I always say there are many ways to attack the argument, and that's true. But as I go through this list today, basically every question applies directly. And because I am going to keep this under 30 minutes, I'm going to do it. I'm not actually going to use all the questions to respond. But this statement is something else. So let's start here first. Question 8. What does the Bible say? And the reason I'm going to start with what does the Bible say is because we have a shared source of authority. We may have some differences of opinion about authority between us Protestants and Catholics, but we do recognize the authority of the Bible. And so here's what Pope Leo is saying. God does not bless any conflict. Okay, that's a claim. Let's go into the Bible and see what the Bible says. Go to the book of Joshua. The Israelites conquered Jericho. That is God's blessing. It is not even something they do, right? Like God is doing it. They are there. They are participating, but it's God taking the initiative. After the Israelites conquered Jericho, they decide to go attack the city of Ai. And I don't actually know how you pronounce that. It's just the letters Ai. So I'm going to call it Ai. The Israelites attack Ai, and Israel doesn't succeed. Why? Was it because God was so upset that they went and they were involved in conflict? Was this just an example of God not blessing any conflict? No. God was punishing Israel for the sin of Achan. And in fact, after Israel kills Achan and his family, God blesses Israel by allowing them to conquer Ai. Here's what Joshua 8:25 says. 12,000 men and women fell on that day, all the people of Ai. So God blessed the Israelites, and the blessing was they went and killed everyone in Ai. Okay, now there's a whole nother discussion here about the judgment of God, about the Israelites killing thousands and thousands of people as they conquered the Holy Land. I'm going to set that aside, right? We got to stay focused. We can't get on the rabbit trails. And there are good answers to that, by the way. But we're going back to this claim by the Pope. God does not bless any conflict. Well, maybe what happened with Jericho and Ai was just a one-off. All right, well, we go to Joshua 10. The Israelites are attacking the Amorites. Joshua asked God to make the sun stand still so they can continue routing the Amorites. And God does it. This is amazing. That they're having so much success in battle. Joshua asked God to keep the sun in the same spot in the sky. And how does God respond? Oh, well, Joshua, I'm not going to bless any conflict. How could you ask that? No, he keeps the sun in the sky so Israel is able to kill more people. All right, go to Judges 7. God gives Gideon victory over the Midianites. This is such a great story because it's such a great example of how God does the thing. Gideon's there, right? And God's like, too many people. I don't want anyone but me to get the glory for this victory. Great, incredible bit of history there. But what happens? God gives Gideon the victory over the Midianites, and Gideon and the Israelites pursue them and kill them. And in fact, if you look at the book of Judges, you'll start noticing this pattern. And this is a little bit of an aside. You just have to forgive me. God delivers his people. The people enjoy God's blessing. The people abandon God. God punishes them. Israel finally calls out to God. And then the cycle starts again with God's deliverance. All right, so you can just look at the biblical record. And when the Pope says that God does not bless any conflict, that's just simply incorrect. Just wrong. I don't know what to say. And I hope the Pope comes back and addresses it. All right, now let's go and look at this as kind of a political argument. So we're going to start with question one. Question one, what happens next? Okay, if the U.S. and Israel don't attack Iran, if they didn't attack Iran, Iran would obtain a nuclear weapon. Okay, nuclear weapons can kill tens of thousands of people. Iran would either use the nuclear weapon or extort the world to gain even more political power. Again, we don't have to guess about Iran's intentions. They have been the leading sponsor of terror in the Middle East and probably throughout the world over the last 5 decades. And their leaders regularly chanted, "Death to America and death to Israel." Okay, again, they're just saying the thing. They're just saying the thing. And guess what? I don't want someone who chants death to Israel to have a nuclear bomb. Okay? That is not the path to peace. Just not. Just not. All right, let's go on to the next question here. Has this been tried before? What Pope Leo is saying here is that peace only comes from the patient promotion of coexistence and dialogues among people. So we have this contention that the only path to peace is the patient promotion of coexistence and dialogue among peoples. So let's have a pause point. Has violence ever led to peace? Interesting question, right? Because there is this tension here between violence and peace. Yet if we go to the historical record, it's quite clear that when violence is used in a just cause, it leads to peace. World War II is an example of that. The American Revolution is an example of that. The Civil War is an example of that. You look at the Korean and the Vietnam Wars, which contained the Soviet Union, eventually leading to peace. In fact, there's a pattern throughout history that weakness leads to more violence. Listen to this 1998 interview with Osama bin Laden. He's being asked to describe the situation when his men took down the American forces in Somalia. And he talks a little bit about the victory of his troops in Afghanistan against Russia. And as a result of that, he says, again, this is Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of 9/11, the legend about the invincibility of the superpowers vanished. Our boys no longer viewed America as a superpower. So when they left Afghanistan, they went to Somalia and prepared themselves carefully for a long war. They had thought that the Americans were like the Russians, so they trained and prepared. They were stunned when they discovered how low was the morale of the American soldier. America had entered with 30,000 soldiers in addition to thousands of soldiers from different countries in the world. As I said, our boys were shocked by the low morale of the American soldier, and they soon realized that the American soldier was a paper tiger. 3 years later, 9/11 happened. 3,000 Americans died because weakness, or even the appearance of weakness, invited violence. All right, let's continue with question 2. Has this been tried before? Has there ever been a time when a pope may have authorized war in the pursuit of peace? Could that ever have happened? Why, yes. Yes, it could. I didn't grab the source on this. I apologize. Might be from history.com. On November 27th, 1095. So November 27th, 1095, Pope Urban II makes perhaps the most influential speech of the Middle Ages, giving rise to the Crusades by calling all Christians in Europe to go to war against Muslims in order to reclaim the Holy Land with the cry of Deus vult, or God wills it. Well, this is interesting. We have a pope in the 21st century disagreeing with a pope from the 11th century. Now, I won't make a snide remark here about authority, but I just want to point out, right? Like, you have the Pope saying military action will not create space for freedom or times of peace, and you have a different Pope saying, because these people keep killing Christians, we better go do something about it, and that something is going to look like a military conflict. So how can we judge between these two things? Well, let's go to question 3. Is there a principle involved? Yes, there is a principle involved. It's and one principle I think is a great principle, is just war theory from the Catholic scholars St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas. Yeah, this is from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Phoenix. Again, so I want to be careful, right? I'm a Protestant. I don't want to just go and take a Protestant view of the just war theory. We can go right to the Catholic Diocese and learn about the just war theory. Based on the writings of St. Augustine, Catholic just war theory requires, in order for a war to be just, 4 conditions must be met. Okay, so I just want to pause here. I don't want you to even think about, does the Iran war meet these conditions? You're welcome to discuss that. But just see the conflict here between Pope Leo, God does not bless any conflict, and the Catholic Church, which for hundreds of years has had a theory on just war. Why? Because the Catholic Church has realized that the best path for peace when your opponent insists on violence is defeating your opponent. And so you have to figure out, well, when is it justified and when is it not? All right, so here's the Catholic just war theory. The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. Okay, so what it's saying is the damage inflicted by the aggressor must be lasting, grave, and certain. So if someone's attacking you, it's got to be a real serious thing, not a little thing, lasting and serious. All other means of putting it to an end must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. Okay, there must be serious prospects of success. We don't just go to war for war's sake. The use of arms must not produce evil and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The the power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating this condition. Okay, so I personally think the Iran war clearly meets those standards. But again, this is more evidence that Pope Leo is wrong when he says God does not bless any conflict, and further, military action will not create space for freedom or times of peace. It simply doesn't hold up biblically. It doesn't hold up historically. It doesn't even hold up according to Catholic teaching. All right, again, we're going to go back to this question of, is there a principle involved? Okay, because how do we square this? How do we square God is love? How do we square turn the other cheek with the idea that, well, a government should go to war? And here's how. Different institutions have different responsibilities. You see, the job of a president is different from the job of a pastor or a pope, even if they occasionally have opinions on the same issue. What is appropriate for me as a father to do, some of those things are inappropriate for the state to do. That's because there are different roles in society, and with those roles come different responsibilities. Jesus' command to turn the other cheek was a command to an individual, not a government. In fact, if you go to Romans 13:4, here's what it says. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Do you see that? Individual, turn the other cheek. Government, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. And the fundamental job of the government, one of the fundamental jobs, is to protect its citizens from those who want to kill them, which is what I believe President Trump is doing in Iran. All right, I want to tell you about a terrific book before we close here. It's called Memory Burn by J.T. Lindstrom, and it's set in a dystopian future where AI definitely hasn't improved the world. Memory Burn has terrific action sequences and memorable characters like Elias Vane. He's a smuggler who takes a no-questions-asked job that does in fact lead to a lot of questions, especially about his past. You see, the AI that runs the world has optimized human beings by erasing their memories. And when I read this, I definitely stayed up way too late one night finishing the book because it was just that good. Both of my older kids have really enjoyed Memory Burn. Check it out today. All right. Oh, I promised to be done in 30 minutes, and I'm going to not make it because I see the time now, and I want to talk about Trump putting a picture of himself as Jesus healing a man on his Truth Social account. Now, Trump has a habit of posting things that he finds amusing or complimentary about himself that others create, and to me, it looks like the picture was AI generated. All right, let's have a pause point. What do you think about Trump posting a picture of himself as Jesus? Was that appropriate? All right. As a Christian, no, I don't think that was appropriate. I think it was sacrilegious. I think it was very disrespectful. And I think it can confuse roles, right? We just talked about roles. Well, there's only one person who is the way, the truth, and the life, and that's Jesus Christ. Don't ever think that a politician can become those things. In fact, the Bible warns us about this. Psalms 146, 3-4. Do not put your trust in princes, in mortal men who cannot save. When their spirit departs, they return to the ground. On that very day, their plans come to nothing. And in fact, Trump, for him, in a rarity for him, actually deleted the post. Now, he said he thought it showed him as a doctor healing a man. Again, you don't know someone's heart. I personally am doubtful of that. The only reason it's plausible is because Trump's interactions with Christians are very often like someone speaking a foreign language. The person communicates well, but occasionally says a phrase that just doesn't fit. It'd be like someone who's a native French speaker saying, well, it was raining horses and pigs. Okay, no, but I understand what you were going for, right? Like, that's not the phrase, that doesn't work. But I could sort of see where you're coming from, and I sort of feel like that with Trump, with Christianity. Obviously, they're a strong base of political support, and Trump likes Christians, and so he is kind of like, well, if I like Christians, I'll say this or I'll act like this, and I don't know for sure, obviously, but to me, that's what this post was like. But obviously, if you have just a passing knowledge of the Bible, that's not appropriate. All right, so let's have a pause point. Oh my word, we have a lot of questions today. Does criticizing Trump about this mean you can't support him in other things? And I think this will happen a lot. You'll kind of see this on social media. Oh, look at what Trump did. How can Christians support him? Okay, I'll tell you how. Because remember, we talk about those different roles. If I went to a church and instead of Pastor Scott, I had Pastor Trump, you know what I would do? I would leave that church. But I did not vote for President Trump as a pastor. The country elected him as a political figure, and I'm going to evaluate Trump as a political figure. So, like every political figure, if he does something wrong, I'm going to say, I don't agree with that. That was wrong. Trump should not have posted that picture, and I'm glad he took it down. Okay, now I'm moving on, right? Because now I'm going to go to a political issue. Again, Trump is not claiming to be, I don't even think he claims to be a Christian. He's not claiming to lead a religious movement. He's claiming to be a political figure. And I think very often that his policy choices have been tremendous. So I want to talk about question 7 here as kind of a wrap up for today's show. Question 7 is, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? Okay, because we got 2 people, the Pope and Donald Trump, that it's very easy for people to say, oh, well, I'm just going to turn my brain off. I'm just going to default to whatever this person did. No, don't do that. Don't just focus on the speaker. Think about the argument. The speaker can give an argument credibility. That's true. But the argument is going to stand or fall on its merits. So put the truth first. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna push this in. There, after the Pope kind of subtweeted Trump pushed back online, criticizing the Pope, and then a couple days later, this happened Sunday. Archbishop Paul Coakley, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, issued a brief response to a social media post by President Trump on Sunday evening, and this is the quote from the Archbishop. I was disheartened that the president chose to write such disparaging words about the Holy Father. Pope Leo is not his rival, nor is the Pope a politician. Okay, so I want you to think about what's happening here. The Pope makes a political argument, and then the response is not a defense of the political argument. It's, well, you can't attack him because he's not a politician. Okay. If you make a political argument, if you step into the political arena, you shouldn't be surprised. You shouldn't go and hide behind the fact that you are also a religious figure in defense of your political argument. Okay, it doesn't work like that. You can't have the hat on of, entering, commenting about politics, and then when you get criticized, oh no, I'm just going to put the religious hat back on. Now, I do believe it is appropriate for pastors, for Christians to get involved in the political sphere, but you can't do that and then just go say, oh, well, you can't attack me because I'm Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Hindu. No, if you're entering the political sphere, you shouldn't be surprised when you get attacked politically. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to it however you're listening today. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.